make some cash. You better throw that ass like you're trying to make some cash. What he say?
What is going on?
What is going on? What is going on?
On the afternoon of January 9th, 2026, the silence of Chicago's South Shore was pierced by gunfire in the 7100 block of South Ridgeland Avenue, where 26-year-old Edshania Williams was found shot and later pronounced dead. In the days that followed, 23-year-old Travali Smith, identified by police as the primary suspect and later charged with first-degree murder and unlawful weapon possession, was taken into custody in the 1300 block of East 60th Street. What led to her death remains a question for investigators, court filings, and those closest to the case. This is not just the story of a killing on Chicago's South Side. It's the unraveling of relationships, community pressures, investigative hurdles, and the legal process that will determine accountability. The backdrop: one woman dead, one man charged, and many unanswered questions. This is Facebook Crime. We deliver clear, factual, and up-to-date true crime stories. Subscribe and turn on notifications to stay informed on the latest cases and investigations. Edshania Williams was a 26-year-old woman residing in Chicago. Public records and reporting identify her as a resident of the city's South Side, though specific details about her employment, education, or long-term plans have not been extensively disclosed in official reports. What is known is that Williams was part of a densely populated urban community where residents often rely on close personal networks for safety, transportation, and daily interaction. Williams' background, as presented in public reporting, does not include a documented criminal history. There were no initial reports indicating she was involved in criminal activity at the time of her death. This absence of such information has positioned her primarily as a victim within the narrative of the case, rather than as an active participant in a broader criminal dispute. Friends and acquaintances referenced in secondary reporting described her as a known presence within her area, though law enforcement has not publicly released statements detailing her personal relationships or any prior conflicts. As with many homicide cases, investigators focus first on reconstructing her final hours to establish context and identify potential suspects. The South Shore neighborhood sits on Chicago's South Side and has experienced persistent challenges related to gun violence over the past decade. The 7100 block of South Ridgeland Avenue, where Williams was found, is a residential area consisting primarily of apartment buildings and multi-unit housing. The street is not isolated, meaning activity in the area can include pedestrian traffic, parked vehicles, and nearby residences. Law enforcement officials routinely emphasize that crimes occurring in such locations often depend heavily on community cooperation, surveillance footage, and digital evidence to reconstruct events. The physical environment of the location plays a key role in how quickly investigators can establish timelines and identify persons of interest. On the morning of January 9, 2026, Chicago police responded to reports of a shooting in the 7100 block of South Ridgeland Avenue. Upon arrival, officers found Edshania Williams suffering from a gunshot wound to the head. Emergency medical personnel were dispatched, but Williams was pronounced dead at the scene. The Cook County Medical Examiner's Office later ruled her death a homicide, confirming that the gunshot wound was the cause of death. No public reports indicated signs of a prolonged struggle at the scene, though investigators processed the area for forensic evidence. Officers secured the scene and began standard homicide protocols, including establishing a perimeter, interviewing nearby residents, searching for surveillance cameras, and documenting physical evidence. At this stage, police had not publicly released information about a suspect, motive, or the circumstances immediately leading up to the shooting. Within hours of the shooting, investigators began working to identify potential suspects. According to police statements, evidence gathered early in the investigation pointed toward a known individual rather than an unknown assailant. Law enforcement officials relied on a combination of witness statements, scene evidence, and information obtained during follow-up inquiries. Although specific investigative methods were not disclosed, authorities indicated they were able to identify Trevally Smith as the suspect on the same day as the shooting. Trevally Smith, age 23, was identified by Chicago police as the primary suspect in the killing of Edshania Williams. Public records list Smith as a Chicago resident. At the time of his arrest, no detailed background information regarding his employment or personal history had been released. Officers was taken into custody in the 1300 block of East 60th Street. Later that same day, in the 1300 block of East 60th Street, police did not report a prolonged search or standoff, suggesting that officers were able to locate and detain him without incident. Following his arrest, Smith was formally charged with first-degree murder, unlawful weapon possession. Prosecutors allege that Smith fired the shot that killed Williams. Under Illinois law, first-degree murder charges indicate that the state believes the act was intentional or committed with knowledge that it would cause death or great bodily harm. At the time charges were announced, prosecutors did not publicly outline a detailed motive. As is standard in ongoing cases, much of the supporting evidence was reserved for court proceedings. One of the central questions in the case is the nature of the relationship between Williams and Smith. Early reporting suggested they were known to each other, though authorities did not clarify whether their connection was familial, romantic, or social. Investigators typically examine prior communication between parties, shared addresses or acquaintances, or past police reports involving both individuals. As of latest updates, law enforcement has not released confirmed details regarding the length or nature of their relationship, leaving this aspects to be clarified through court filings and testimony. Police processed the scene for ballistic evidence, spent shell casings, and firearm-related materials. The weapon involved was not publicly displayed, though investigators recovered or linked a firearm to Smith. In modern homicide investigations, digital evidence plays a significant role. Investigators likely reviewed surveillance footage from nearby buildings, cell phone data, and witness accounts from residents in the area. Authorities have not publicly detailed how each piece of evidence contributed to probable cause, but confirmed they had sufficient grounds to file charges. Smith was scheduled to appear in court following his arrest. During initial proceedings, judges typically review the charges, detention status, and preliminary evidence. Prosecutors often argue for detention in homicide cases, citing public safety concerns. At this stage, Smith is presumed innocent under the law. Defense attorneys may challenge the reliability of witness statements, the handling of forensic evidence, and the interpretation of digital data. Prosecutors, meanwhile, must demonstrate intent, opportunity, and direct involvement. The killing of Edshania Williams added to ongoing concerns about gun violence in South Shore. Residents expressed general fears related to safety, though no large public demonstrations or protests were reported in connection with this specific case. Community reactions in similar cases often include increased calls for police presence, discussions about conflict resolution, and renewed attention to gun access. Chicago continues to experience high rates of firearm-related homicides, particularly on the South Side. Cases like this are often examined within a broader pattern of interpersonal disputes escalating to lethal violence, easy access to firearms, and concentrated crime in specific neighborhoods. Law enforcement agencies and policymakers frequently reference such cases when advocating for violence reduction strategies. Trevally Smith remains charged with first-degree murder. The case is proceeding through the Cook County court system. Further details are expected to emerge through hearings, motions, and potential trial testimony. The outcome of the case will depend on the evidence presented and legal arguments made in court. The killing of Edshania Williams represents a single incident within a larger framework of urban gun violence, but its resolution depends on a detailed legal process focused on facts, evidence, and due process. With a suspect charged and proceedings underway, the case now moves from the streets of South Shore into the courtroom, where responsibility and accountability will be formally examined. Thanks for watching. Did you find this case informative? If you want more true crime stories, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications to stay informed on the latest cases and investigations.